Thank you everyone for joining us again. We are here with Michelle, the host of this entire series. Actually, this is her restaurant, her joint, her hookup. And we have just had a fantastic conversation about her 32 years in Asia, both as a restaurant entrepreneur, but also now as a social entrepreneur. Before she got into social entrepreneurship, she's been giving back to the community, to the country, to the region in many ways. And this is a fantastic conversation. We hope that you will enjoy it. And make sure and comment below, subscribe over there, and ask some questions for her going forward. Michelle, thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks.
All right, a little pleasure.
So I'm Michelle Garnaut. I have been in the region, Asia, for more than 30 years. I lived in Hong Kong up until, I still fundamentally live in Hong Kong on paper, from 1984 until now. In the mid-90s, I came to Shanghai to look at doing a business, look at opening a restaurant. We opened in 99, and a couple of years after that, I started to look in Beijing. We opened in 2009, we opened Capital M in Beijing. So that's sort of my business side. My personal side, I come from a cooking background. I have always worked in restaurants. Even when I was at university, I still worked in restaurants. I still preferred working in restaurants to going to university. And yes, I've always had a bit of an interest in things outside the restaurant world. So interestingly, I think having a business has given me the opportunity to do everything I would want to do, and it's given me a sort of vehicle.
You talk about the fact that you were in business before, and now you're more of a social entrepreneur. You have that leaning. So can you talk a little bit about how did you grow comfortable with that idea? And two, what were some of the early conversations or some of the early stages of breaking away from your past pure profit business mindset?
Well, first of all, I don't think, actually I never really, for me making money was part of a necessity to repay money. You know, I had shareholders. When I started the business in Hong Kong, I didn't have any money, so I borrowed all of it. So I really had to be really careful. And, you know, money's a funny thing, because if it's other people's money, I'm not really very good with money, and not really very focused on money. But if it's other people's money, I knew that I would have a sort of an exaggerated sense of responsibility. Anyway, I have an exaggerated sense of responsibility. Being the oldest of a big family, I've got that anyway. But I knew if it was other people's money, I would be able to say, no, I can't pay you that. No, I can't. Whereas if it was, you know, sort of my own money, I'd be like, oh, okay, then, you know. I'll have to. So I think for me, I never really focused on making money. We were lucky when we opened the restaurant in Hong Kong. Right from the beginning, we actually repaid our investment in like 5 months. It was amazing, but I was very careful with money right from the beginning. I mean, I was stingy, you know, no, I'm not paying this, and I want that done for nothing. And that's another very interesting thing about money. The more you've got, the more careless you are with it. So I think that for me, there was never a focus. It was never a focus of, I need to make money. We just made money. And it was like, yeah, you just get used to making money. Oh, this is good, you know, you've got plenty of money. You can sort of do what you like. But when 97 came, so from 89 we opened till about 97, 98, things started to get tougher. It was okay, but things started to get tougher. We opened in Shanghai, and again, I went back to zero. I mean, I borrowed, we had an overdraft. I was like, you know, and it was a big risk. You know, there was nothing else down here on the Bund, so it was like, oh my God, you know, and it was a lot of money. When we started, it was more than $1 million US, which was a lot of money. You know, I'd opened Hong Kong and, you know, 300,000 or 400,000. So this was like, oh my God. And of course, China was so complicated. So that was always a good reminder. And then when we had, you know, they go back to that, it's like, okay, I've got to be super, super careful with money again. And then, and then in 2003 with SARS, I mean, it was a disastrous year. But we came out of the end of the year, okay, you know, we came out, actually we'd made a profit at the end of that year. So I think that those ups and downs teach you a lot. you learn a lot. You learn much more from very difficult situations than you learn from success. I think success is like, yeah, well, I'm smart, I'm successful, isn't that? Yeah, and I think people get a bit arrogant with success, and I think there is quite a bit of luck in it. And then when things are really tough, I think you learn quite a lot. And I think I had a year of being very like, oh God, what am I doing? How am I going to manage? And then I just thought, it's okay. It's all right. Mm-hmm. And basically, it doesn't really matter. And sort of changing my focus, as long as you can, make enough to survive, be ethical, be moral in your business, treat people properly. Mm-hmm. All of that has always been really important to me. But it's extremely important for many people, and for many young Chinese people too. I think it's a time of thinking, actually, it's not only about money. Mm-hmm. Life isn't only about money, but you want financial security. Yep. And where people feel financially secure is also really different. Some people feel financially secure with that, and some people, need private airplanes and still don't feel financially secure,
I mean, you've been investing into the community through, even before your village project, like you've been through literary, through art, through residences, through all of that, really pushing the limits of art and culture, at least leading the charge early on.
Good.
Tell me, how and why did you start doing that? Why was it so important to you? Because your investors must have been like, Michelle, come on, like we're flying these people in, right?
No. Basically, when I asked them to invest in the restaurant, I said, I don't really care what you think, and please don't come and tell me you don't like the colour of the walls, because I'm not going to change it, sort of. So.
But why have you really pushed the arts and culture into China?
For me, I've always done, even, I'm one of a large number of children. I think I've grown up with, you need to care about other people in the community. That's a sort of value, whether my mother's very Catholic, whether that's a Christian value. I think for me, I always wanted to do sort of interesting things, and just going to work in the restaurant every day and staying there and serving people food, and that's all very nice, and you get to meet interesting people. But, beyond that, that's not really all that interesting, is it? So, even when I was working in Hong Kong, I've always worked with different organizations, different other organizations. So I worked with the Hip Hong Society for Handicapped Children, now just called Hip Hong. And they were a government body at the time. But we did a big fundraising event every year called Great Chefs, the Great Hong Kong Great Chefs of Hong Kong. And that was really great fun. And then when we came to, it's sort of accidental in some ways, because when we came and opened here, and the room that we're sitting in now was empty when we opened. Mm-hmm. So we opened on the Bund. That was great. We opened in the winter. We were fine. There was obviously a need when we opened because we were a bit busy from the time we opened. Mm-hmm. And then this room was empty. And first of all, I've forgotten this. Dado reminded me to Davide Quadrio, Dado from Art Hub. He came and set up here. So I said, it's empty. You can have it. You can have it for a while. I said, you have to paint it. You have to put some lights in. So he had his first gallery here. And I'd sort of forgotten that. And then other people used it, and it was used for this and that and the other thing. I had a friend who sold furniture.
I mean, how important is it for you to be doing something different than others? Like, and in some contexts, you've got to be getting a lot of calls for tea and shit like that when you're running these events, right?
Tons, yeah.
So why do you keep doing it?
Because it's fun. It's interesting. You meet interesting people. There's new ideas. It's stimulating. And I think, when we first started doing it, it was very important to me, and the same with the residency. It was very important to me that people came to China and actually saw something of China for themselves. I was sort of really sick of journalists coming in 4 days, come to Shanghai, stay on the Grand Hyatt, come to M on the Bund, visit one other place on the Bund, wander around the former French concession and say, I'm writing a piece, I'm writing the definitive piece on Shanghai. It's like, no idea. You have no idea, no idea about China. And that was one of the reasons that we started to do things. I felt very strongly that people had to really either totally negative view of China, which was completely unfair, or this la-la view of China, which was also ridiculous. And it's sort of like, well, let's have people here and more interaction and talking to other people about what's really happening. And, so I think all of that is, and every year it's very interesting. You meet really interesting people, and it's stimulating. It stimulates ideas. I like ideas. It's like, hey, I got an idea. Let's do this. I mean, my staff all go, oh no, don't tell me she hasn't got an idea. No, we haven't got time for an idea.
So outside of that, you've also started a program of bathhouses. First off, can you introduce a little bit about what that is, how big it is, what the goals are, what you've accomplished?
So Village People Project started also about 2004 or 5. I was working with a number of different organizations. Actually, when we came and opened, Bruno and Andrew, who was our chef, said, we should do some not-for-profit, we should do some charity work. And I said, well, you're here all the time, you're going to find a charity. You find something that you want to do. And it's like, oh no, you have to find it for us. So I did. I found this guy, Rob Glover, who was doing a foster care program, So I worked with Rob for quite a long time. We set it up in Hong Kong. We ran the Care for Children Carnival in Hong Kong. We raised lots of money. I was much better at raising. I put somebody else in charge of the money. We raised lots of money for them. And at the end of that, I thought, okay, Rob's really off the ground. I don't need to be the fundraiser for Rob, for Care for Children. They've got plenty of money. And I thought, I really want to do something that's actually focused on rural areas. And I felt that was really a strong need, and women, children, rural areas. So we did a lot of research, and eventually, through a friend, went to an area on the Shanxi. Actually, we always thought it was Gansu, but once we started building the bathhouse, we found out actually it was Shanxi. It was right on the border. I mean, literally 100 meters away was Gansu. But we looked into the sort of health situation. The idea at the time, or the rumor that was around, was that there was a lot of women committing suicide by drinking pesticide. Whether that was true or not, we heard of, we met people whose, mother had done that. But what the real numbers were, who would ever know? But what we found out when we did some research was that actually all of the women who were most at risk had no social life whatsoever. They had zero social interaction with anybody outside this very closed unit, and they had all the women. We did a whole village. It was 450 women of childbearing age. All of them had low-lying urinary tract, anal and vaginal infections all the time, and so they were building up immunity to antibiotics. And so we decided that actually there were no washing facilities at the time. We went and stayed in this one village called Mazhachuang. We walked to the village with the bathhouse, the next one. It was a sunny day. By the time we got there, it took us an hour and a half to walk. By the time we got there, we were unbelievably hot and sweaty. Yeah. And it was closed, and they said you have to wait until 5 o'clock. We'll get it ready. It was a horrible, filthy, disgusting place. And they said we'll have it ready by 5 o'clock. So we went around and looked. By the time we walked back, of course, we desperately needed another shower. So, I mean, you can imagine working in the fields all day. So then we went around and we did a whole pile of research into bathhouses. Most of them were brothels and gambling dens. Nearly all of them. I mean, that you could hire the shower was incidental. So it was completely incidental, that you would pay 5 RMB or whatever for a shower. And so we decided to build a bathhouse. We did 4 of those, the first one in Mazhachuang, and then in 3 other villages, not that far away from, I was 20 kilometers, but that was a long way, and most people didn't have. I mean, it's incredible to remember what it was like. One person in the village had a motorbike, and then people had little, truck, to carry the sort of. I mean, there was one bus a day along the main highway. So after we did 4 of them, in 2012 we found it much more difficult, for 4 different villages, much more difficult to work. Local governments wouldn't work with us. Nobody really wanted to work with the Lawai, it was like, no, we can't, and it was a bit of a nervous time for people. They didn't really know what was the new sort of situation, and so we moved away, after a lot of research, we moved away from that model of this sort of one building bathhouse, and we started to look at other models. And then we were approached by a guy in Qinghai, Dorje Taihua, which is he's Tibetan Chinese. That's his sort of the Pinyinisation of his name, and he is in Qinghai, and he'd worked on a lot of community projects himself. Actually, one of the guys that you introduced me to was a guy called Kevin, who went to Xi'an. I recognized this guy's name, and I thought, I know this guy's name, and I went back and looked, and you'd introduced me to him.
Yeah, because he was a Rotary
Kevin,
kid.
Yeah.
Right? He was another one from Rotary.
Yeah, maybe.
And he was doing all these women water projects and things like
exactly.
that. Yeah.
So somehow we connected with Dorje, and then we started working with him, and we've now changed the model. We're working with a whole village, raising the funds to do individual bathrooms on every single household in the village.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's sort of how the Village People Project has grown. And actually what's interesting, I think what's interesting that's now, I mean, I started that idea in 2003. Actually, it was probably the same year. It must have been a very creative year. It was sort of an idea like, no, I want to do something different. In 2005, we went to Majajrang, and I went with a friend who's a doctor, Li Liang, who's an artist. I met, flying back, Ma Qingyun, who was a very famous architect, who was from Shanxi, from Xi'an. He agreed to design it. So it all sort of just came together. But what's interesting about it, I think, is how we had to adapt and change. And we tried to look at recycling water. So we tried to sort of we tried to be as responsible as possible, but it wasn't possible to do it. We realized that it just had to be simple. You had to do what you could do, and you had to just go ahead and do it. And you couldn't be questioning all the time, well, what about the water, and what about the waste of water? But equally...
So what are the real benefits of these bathhouses? Like, what was the tangible benefit?
It changed. You could feel it. I mean, it changed. The whole... One, the health improved. 2, there was much more pride in the village, and it brought more... The bathhouse was basically the first sort of enterprise there. I mean, there were shops. There was nothing in the village. I mean, there were a couple of shops where they sold seed and fertilizer and beer and eggs if you needed them, and fabric and that sort of village shop. There are a few places like that, but there was nothing else. And after the bathhouse opened, there was a sort of swagger around town as we all came out with clean hair and felt, showed ourselves off on a Saturday night. And also other businesses started. People started like small restaurants, and so it was sort of like, oh, this is interesting. It was that people had money to spend as well.
Okay. So speaking of showing people there's a different way, my last question kind of comes back to, if you think about your clientele and the conversations that you have, I mean, you're kind of bumping shoulders with some of the highest of highest society, in government and business, and just generally well-minded people, especially if they're coming for a literary festival that are already open. Can you tell me a little about how the conversations have changed about the challenges that China's facing, but more importantly, the importance of individuals to act on those and to take on these little projects like these you got nothing out of it except for fulfillment and how you define it. A lot of people are now morphing into this as well, and kind of getting back to your original definition of social entrepreneurial and the fact that more people are now looking for that balance. You've had a lot of discussions with people who are really just business minded, make money, China's booming, but how is,
I think
is it changing?
It's changed. I think it's changed a lot, and I think that from the time that one of the first charity things we did a big dinner for Care for Children, and there was there were a lot of interesting things that happened over putting on that dinner. It was a fundraising dinner for them. But one of them was that, all of the staff that I worked with, and, the ones that I was close to, the management staff, just didn't get it. They didn't get it. They were like, what? Well, we're doing what? We're not getting any money, but what about the tips? What about it's like, well, no, we're giving all the money away. Tonight we're doing a dinner and we're giving all the money away. And they were like, there were a lot of interesting conversations with, working class kids. I don't believe you should give people money, Yeah, I saw it, Michelle, sometimes you give beggars in the street money. This is really stupid and you shouldn't do this. And I said, but you're only lucky that you got a job in Shanghai. If you lived somewhere else, you might not be so lucky. That was really interesting. And I said at the time, to everybody, let's ask all of our suppliers, the wine suppliers, no big deal, but let's ask all of our suppliers if they will give us the produce and give us everything we need. And they were like, are you crazy? Nobody's going to give us anything. And what was really interesting was that the vegetable guy and another, I can't remember, the egg guy or somebody, actually said yes, they would give us everything. One of them had been adopted and the other one had an adopted brother or something, adopted cousin or something like that. So that was sort of also really interesting. And so I've sort of watched that change at a really grassroots level. And now I think from there, philanthropy is such an important thing. And I hope this new NGO law is a good thing for philanthropy that actually allows NGOs to be registered and money to be able to be given to NGOs, there. So I'm hoping for a good effect on this.
Yeah.
But I think that it has
around,
changed.
Around tables in the restaurant, do people talk about this more? They look out the window, they see the smog, they give a shit now?
I think people really give a shit about smog, yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. What they can do about it, I don't know, do people feel a bit powerless, what they can do? One of the things that interests me is that people don't equate their own use of power and not turning off lights and with the creation of smog. They're like, well, that's from cars. It's like, well, even if you don't have a car, you're still adding to it. But that sort of thing, that sort of drives me crazy. When we worked with Greenovate, that was interesting. It was very interesting to see how, the IEs, this idea that you could just waste, you had it. It's like, what's she complaining about? She's got plenty of money. She can afford to pay for it. Water doesn't cost anything. It's like, it's not true. Water actually costs a lot. And water is still ridiculously subsidized in China. So I think there's a real movement also with young people. I think young people have gone, they've worked in other places, they've seen other things. And in China, they also see that they don't live in such a bubble as they used to.
We basically need to gear up the next generation of leaders and ambassadors. One, how did you stick with it for so long, given all the challenges? And two, what are a couple things that you would tell someone who is, I don't know, her age, right? 28, right? 25. You look 22, but you're 25 years old and she's starting her career. How would you gear these?
I think that for young people, you can't sit around complaining and feel hopeless, like, oh, it's hopeless, the pollution's hopeless. You basically have to do something, and everybody has to do something. So I think actually you just do what you can. And I think also I think it's really important to give something back, whether that's volunteering, whether that's some of your salary. I just think there's a whole new way of the way that young people think. EGRC is Educating Girls in Rural China. That alumni of EGRC, they're 11 years now. They're about the same as the Village People Project. That alumni now, so these girls have gone through, they now have jobs, a lot of them have got good jobs. They've got their own alumni, and they actually band together, and they raise money, and they now pay for that next generation of girls to be educated.
Kind of like your vegetable and chicken suppliers.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's happened to them, and that spreads. So, and I think actually as things have got economically a bit tougher in China, I think, people think more like, well, it's, you work yourself to death and what for? So why am I doing this? And it's not just me, and it's not just my family. Maybe it's also got to do with a one-child policy, that you've got smaller and smaller and smaller units of families.
Yeah.
That you can't say, well, I've got, when I'm 50, my family is going to be 100 people. Because it's not. Your family's maybe only
Small
going to be
group.
2 of you or 4. You're going to be lucky to have parents left.
Yeah.
you know,
Oh, very true.
And kids of your own. So maybe that's also changed the way that younger people think.